EFF leader Julius Malema says white monopoly capital exists. Malema says the concept should not be misused or rather dismissed simply because Bell Pottinger misused it. The EFF leader was speaking at the Daily Mavericks, the gathering held in Sandton. In addressing delegates at the meeting, Malema says white monopoly capital exists in the banking, mining and property sectors in the country. And the firebrand leader believes the now disgraced PR firm Bell Pottinger had hijacked the term, but that does not mean the problem does not exist. He also clarified, saying he's rather not referring to individual white people when he speaks of white monopoly capital.
We must not make a mistake of abandoning the struggle for economic emancipation because of irritations. We must remain focused in fighting white monopoly capital and in transforming the economy to benefit the majority of our people.
Malema also reiterated his stance on nationalization and issued a warning to investors who do not want to partake in the empowerment of the majority of South Africans.
When we say let's nationalize the banks, you say these people are crazy, they don't know what they are talking about. We are bound to be crazy because not even 1% of the banks in South Africa is owned by a black person. What do you do in a situation like that, where people, the bank owners, had an opportunity to transform without anyone forcing them, had an opportunity to transform without anyone expropriating from them? 23 years into democracy, they've never done that. Many people say these investors will go because you are scaring them, they will live with their things. What is the point of having them here if we cannot eat this food? We can only smell the food. We have no access to this meal. The bosses are eating alone. The bosses must begin to eat with their people. Otherwise, they can take their food and go, because this food is not benefiting anyone here. We are only eating the crumbs that fall from the table. And that's what we black people are fighting over.
And speaking in exclusive interviews to 8 and 7, both President Jacob Zuma and Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma highlighted the role of white monopoly capital in the South African economy.
You have got companies today that are basically white. They start from the biggest commodities to the broom. Their names are written there. They are monopolizing every space of the economy. It's a fact. They are monopolies. I don't know why shouldn't they be called by what they practice. And I don't know why there's a debate, in fact. Because there is a monopoly capital, and in South Africa it is white.
That white monopoly capital is not endorsing me. I'm not surprised. I would have been surprised if they had endorsed me. We cannot be told our people must be poor forever because investors will not come.
And is this the end game for white monopoly capital? The questions become more pertinent as unemployment is at its highest since 1994 at 27.7%. A negligible growth of black-owned industries and entrepreneurs in the last 23 years, and the change in the pattern of land ownership. The top 3 richest South Africans have more wealth than 90% of the poor population combined. Difficulty in access to tightly held financial systems are owned by few monopolistic forces in the economy, and no access to government funding due to absence of state bank or lending facilities at the Post Bank. And the South African businesses are accused of hoarding profits to the tune of 700 billion rand instead of ploughing it back into the economy. In addition, South African businesses are accused of 60 billion rand illicit outflows from the country every year, and the increasing cases of corporate collusion and price fixing directly impacting the poorest. And is this time for decisive action to dismantle white monopoly capital? And is this possible to ignore the rumble on the ground to implement a radical economic transformation? And joining us in studio is Kabelo Matlala, Transform RSA spokesperson, Abotsang Moilwa, political analyst. Good evening to you and thanks so much for joining us. It took us a while to finally get to the bottom of whether white monopoly capital exists or not, but they're still denialist. Why is that?
Well, good evening, Cindy. Good evening, chaps, and the MN7 viewers. I don't think they're denialists. I think there are a bunch of politicians, particularly inside the ruling African National Congress, who wants to serve white capital interest. Their purpose of existing is to serve white capital interest, and they have to defend it. So I don't want to say South Africans in general, even white people, who deny that white capital exists. It doesn't. There's monopoly in South Africa. And I hear Julius Malema saying in the sectors of agriculture, in the sectors of mining, and in the sectors of the banking, there's white capital. I'm saying in all sectors, we don't have any sector in the economy of South Africa where black people dominate or are even with white people. So white people dominate in all economic sectors of the country. And I don't think, as the president has said, there should be debate on that. There's monopoly in South Africa, and the monopoly is racially based due to historical backgrounds that were racism, that was apartheid and segregation, and therefore it cannot be any other thing. In other countries, they may be having another form of monopoly, whereby some families or some factions or some politicians are dominating the economy of a certain country. But in South Africa, it's white people who own and control almost everything in the country, and therefore the white monopoly capital emanates from that. And I don't know if there's any person who's normal in his senses who can refuse and or debate that white monopoly capital doesn't exist.
I think there's some, as you're saying, we're trying to justify it, and we have instruments by law and government agencies that will, in a sense, almost make this normal, as if it's part of the culture of South Africa. You have your Statistics South Africa who come out with figures to talk about unemployment, etc. And you have other systems as well where the equity, for example, on the JSE, that will tell you 23% of the JSE is black-owned, etc. Rematala, do you think that these also don't assist in really dealing with the matter of inequality?
On this issue, I think South Africans, we should be objective and actually look at the empirical data. Because if you look at the empirical data, the data shows that the economy of South Africa is captured. It might not be captured by the race that we prefer it. It might not be captured by, how can I say, it's not politically correct to say it's captured by white people, but it is. So why is it that these institutions that you're talking about, they can repeatedly release statistics, but these statistics are ignored, you see?
But there's a reason to that, Rematlala. There's a reason why when South African statistics release figures, they're ignored. Even agencies of government, like the South African Reserve Bank, which is supposed to manage and control the banks, it's in white control. It's owned by white people. The institutions of government that are supposed to manage and put corrective measures towards transforming the economy of the country in the hands of the few minority to the hands of the majority of the people, or to an equal distribution. The ANC policy document talks, if you look at the Freedom Charter, the ruling party, it talks about equal redistribution of the resources. It doesn't even say according to the population demographics. It says equal. But we have not even been halfway there. So it's very difficult for the government of the day, which is funded, controlled, and manipulated by white capital, to can come and implement policies of the former liberation movement, which are intended to put transformation factors in place. We cannot talk of transformation anymore as a country. We'll have to go through a very radical form of painful exercise. And when Julius Malema says, and I'm glad that it came from Julius, there's one thing about Julius Malema. He's the most inconsistent person. The only consistent thing about Julius is inconsistency. One day he says something, another day he says something else. Today he spoke about how he's regretting voting with the DA. Today he spoke about white monopoly capital exists. It's not the first time, I must put it on record, that Julius talks about white monopoly capital. It's not the beginning. When the EFF was formed, Julius used to talk about white monopoly capital and its existence, the control of banks. The bank ownership is one of the cardinal pillars of the EFF. But the question is, you can say these things on TV, you can say them on radio and public speeches. What are you doing as a politician to can advance that? Are you taking those measures into parliament to make them debate, to try and transform and change the laws of the country, to can try and remove this control of banks from white hands into national hands? We don't even have a central bank in South Africa whereby there's supposed to be South African Reserve Bank that is owned by government. We don't have that. We all know, Mr. Matlala, that the South African Reserve Bank is owned by white people, particularly foreign white people. And that is the sad state of affairs in the country.
Yeah, but there's a tendency, an inclination to blame government and the corruption. You talk about state-owned entities, the looting allegations going on there. And the reality is that we're sitting with a business sector that is hoarding money under the guise of policy uncertainty, this and the other reason, forgetting that their wealth was amassed because of the mineral resources and other opportunities in this country.
Exactly. I think South Africans have to have, like I say again, an objective conversation, because now it's all about identity. It's all about such and such says this organization says that. South Africans, we need to sit down on the table, look at our history, stop hiding parts of our history that we don't necessarily want to get into deeply. Look at our history with an objective lens, and then we'll see that South Africa is a country which has a history which we are looking at with one eye.
And I mean, some of the criticism, again, with radical economic transformation, that policy is, what was it, Johan Rupert saying that this is another code name for thieving, and, it won't benefit, it won't make any material change.
Well, if it comes from Johan Rupert, what do you expect in the air? Johan Rupert is a product of a very, thieves, the biggest thieves in South African economy and history. You talk of the Oppenheimer family, you talk of the Rupert family, and all other benefactors of the neo-colonialism system. So he will be worried, he will be disturbed once any politician, especially from the ruling party, starts talking of radical economic transformation, because then it means black people will be given opportunities to tap into what he inherited from his forefathers, and he's got control of this monopoly and all that. I don't think this is just a slogan that we are talking of radical economic transformation. The African National Congress, which is the ruling party in the Republic of South Africa, has been talking about this whole thing forever. ANC has presented documents and policies which are appealing to many people here. The only failure that the ANC did was radically implementing those policies, that they didn't do that. So this is nothing new, if you know the history and the politics of South Africa, what the ANC is talking about. It's not new that Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma is talking about radical economic transformation, or the president of the country is talking about that radical transformation of the country, the 30% of mine ownership, the land redistribution. It's not new, to the politics of the country. What is new is the ANC has conceded to the fact that they tried to do it in a very systematic, soft manner. And that soft manner did not work for over 20 years. And therefore, the ruling party is saying, let us review this whole thing. But we know that there are people within the ruling party who want to divert or to depart from that point to say, no, we can't implement it radically. I don't know what is their reason, besides to say they are benefiting from white domination. They are sitting in chairs and boards of white-dominating companies. I don't see any other reason why a member or a leader of the ANC will say radical transformation must not be implemented at the moment in the country, when the radical economic transformation has been the policy of the ruling party or the position of the ruling party for many years, from its founding. The other day I spoke about when the ANC was founded. One of the fundamental principles of the African National Congress was the return of the land to the rightful owners, the African people. That's why the ANC has the slogan, Maibuye Africa. Now, the ANC has realized that they didn't bring Africa back to the people, and therefore they have to embark on a much more faster pace, much more radical pace to can do that. And I don't think it's a miracle. And I don't think it's a wrong thing to do. I think the country has to embark on that, or else we'll end up in a situation whereby there's violence in the country and people will take the land and all these economic opportunities by force and by violent men, and we don't want it.
Yeah, I mean, and not to want to rewrite history, but the issue around retribution, as you were saying, Rematala, with regards to the atrocities and the violation of human rights, of apartheid, the exclusion out of the economy and wealth of this country, do you think that that has a place, that we need to incorporate that in how we deal with the current challenges we face?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very pertinent that at this time, like I said before, that we look at these things objectively. It seems that us as South Africans, we live within a microcosm, and then we don't want to look at what is happening globally. Globally, people are starting to realize that a small percent of the population controls a large percent of the wealth. So if that works globally, why is the same logic not applied locally? Because if we were to look at it locally, we'd see that, as you're saying, the atrocities that happened in the past were committed by a certain percentage of the population. Who are these percentage of the population? What are their characteristics? If we were to look at these objectively, we'd see that, okay, it's Oxfam, for example. Oxfam released a report earlier this year that said that 50% of the population, of the wealth of South Africa is controlled by 3 families, you see. If an organization such as Oxfam from outside of South Africa can look at South Africa and see that this is going on, why is it that we as South Africans cannot look at this and see that it's going on? It boggles the mind.
Yeah, but even if you have, you know, in your own personal space or your area of influence, and you have that personal agency where you want to see things change, be it as a board member or be it an employee in a corporation. A classical example is the FNB4, who are having a private conversation around issues and raising these as well with management around the disparities, not only on the income, but the fact that you know, black and white is still miles apart when it comes to fringe benefits.
Well, Cindy, you know what? We cannot take it away from our people, you know, particularly black people, that they will talk and raise these issues. We've got a new generation coming up. You know, the youth are asking questions. The other day I mentioned how my son, who's 14, asked me why Gogo van Vieren can afford to have coffee every day at 11 o'clock and his Gogo is sitting at home and he can't afford to have tea in a restaurant. These are some of the things we have to deal with as a nation, that we cannot put a blind eye, that the current generation or the upcoming generation will ask those questions to say, but what is going on? How come we still have imbalances when we had a black, you know, party ruling the country? And these are some of the things that the leaders of the ruling party, as well as the opposition parties, and I'm glad that Julius has come up to speak about this whole process. At which platform? You see, what is much more interesting is that before Julius took that platform created by Daily Maverick, Pravin Gordhan, who's the former Minister of Finance, was on that platform earlier on, protecting white capital, talking about how the status quo must remain or go back to what it was before Jacob Zuma started talking about radical economic transformation. That's what Pravin Gordhan said. Now, Julius Malema comes in the afternoon and he speaks a totally different language, a radical language that says, no, but this is not correct. We have white people dominating 3 sectors of the industry. I've already said it's dominating all sectors of the industry, and therefore the status quo cannot remain. But the challenge we are faced with as a nation is that we don't have a political appetite. We don't have lawmakers, MPs, as well as the ruling party and leaders of the ruling party who are willing at the moment to stand up and say, let us transform this whole process. Let us bite the bullet and actually implement radical changes in order to try and bring the imbalances. Look at the mining charter. I mean, the ANC comes with a proposal to say, let us give black people 30% of mine ownership and profits from mines to black people. And the white capitalists, they're rejecting that. The DA, which is actually a white party with few black people inside, are in the forefront of helping white capital owners to reject 30% of mine ownership. A mine ownership that truly and historically was supposed to have been owned 83% by the indigenous Africans who are the owners of this land. And we are still negotiating to own 30%. So there is no appetite from political office bearers to say, but let us transform this. It has happened in Botswana without violence, without anything. In Botswana, you look at the country policy saying, mine owners, 51% of mine owners, it belongs to the nationalities of Botswana, to the government of Botswana. And we don't have that kind of situation.
Yeah, but maybe the problem is that they themselves are conflicted, and, you know, it's human nature to preserve what you have unfortunately, at the demise of the majority.
And also, another thing which is very important now is that it seems that the debate itself is being controlled. What can you speak about? When can you speak about it? So now, hopefully, now that Julius Malema has gone on the platform and spoken about white monopoly capital, maybe some of the people who are saying that it doesn't exist, perhaps now they'll say, okay, let's talk about it. It probably won't happen, but maybe.
Do you think this will clarify the confusion around?
I don't think there's confusion. I think there's denialism.
Yeah.
You know, I think people are denying, and as he correctly said, or you said it, some people are benefiting. They're in a comfort zone of protecting what they have. So that's selfish position of politicians to protect what they have, when generally the nation owns nothing. I don't think it will have to take Julius Malema to clarify the situation. I mean, the president of the country has said it. Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who is one of the contenders of the president of the ANC, has talked about it. The ANC policy conference in July, they debated this issue. It came up very loud and clear. So whoever is still denying that a white monopoly capital exists and therefore will need radical economic transformation, I've got a problem with those kind of politicians. What are they benefiting? They are very selfish, in my view. They are protecting their income. They don't care about the rest of the nation. They don't care about somebody sitting in Matuba or in Lihurutsi who needs to own shares of that diamond or that cattle that is farming in that area where the person is born and living. And that's where the problem is. We don't have politicians who care about the nation. We have got selfish political office bearers who focus on their pockets, and that's all they care about.
Yeah, but how do you then dismantle this well-entrenched white monopoly capital if, as you're saying, that policymakers themselves don't have the appetite? And secondly, that by law, I mean, if you look at, for example, was it Solidarity that went to Concord to argue around black economic empowerment, affirmative action, questioning whether these policies in themselves are not discriminatory. And yet they are meant to have redressed issues of injustice in the past.
Right. You know, Malcolm X said something which is very, very, which I like to remember at times like this. He says that if you stab me in the back, progress is not for you to leave to pull out the knife just a little bit. You see, if you pull the knife out of my back and then let me heal, that's progress, you see. So now, since the transition to 1994, the same peoples who were controlling the wealth of the country now control the narrative. They're telling us that South Africa is on a path to recovery, but then the numbers are showing us that no, regardless of what the government is going to do, regardless of the policies which the government would like to implement, the capital remains in the hands of a select few. What incentive do these minority, what incentive do they have to let go of their power? They don't have any.
And they're not going to relinquish it.
Right, so the government
they have
must
a
be
constitutional protection. We have a constitution in this country which guaranteed minority rights, which has was actually negotiated through the CODESA negotiation to say, you leave white people with what they own and control, you don't touch them for peace sake and focus on economic power. And that's where our problem is. That's why earlier on I mentioned lawmakers, people who are sitting in parliament. If we had the right people, those 400 MPs, some may be white, some may be from the DA, which is protecting white rights and white land ownership and economic control. But there's over 300 black people sitting in that parliament who are supposed to be making laws that will improve and, or as they say in Afrikaans, verbeter, the life of black people. And they're not doing it. So the problem is the laws of this country and the lawmakers. The lawmakers are not doing anything. They are not putting an effort to can try and amend. If all those black MPs can just unite to say, let's transform the economy, not the ANC, not the EFF or PAC or Inkatha. No. Those black people who are sitting in parliament, who were mandated by the black nation to represent the nation, can change the laws of the country, then we'll have a better life. But they will not going to do that because, as you said earlier on, Cindy, they're in white pockets, they're being controlled by white capital, they're thinking with their stomachs, not their heads, and that's the problem we are faced with as a nation.
Yeah, and I hope and pray that on Facebook, your signature greeting of a good morning, my landless black people, will not survive another day, or at least in our lifetime, that things will change and, equality can be realized.
I hope so. I hope I will see black people owning land like Zimbabweans before I die.
Okay, thank you so much. Much appreciated to our guest. We're speaking to Kabelo Matlala, Transform RSA spokesperson, Putsangwelo, political analyst, and thanks so much for watching. And up next, ANC Decides with Mfundo Mabalana.